Welcome back to Sleeping with History. Please let me know where you're watching from tonight. Today we talk about the weirdest kings the world has ever seen. History usually honors power with straight backs and serious voices. We speak of emperors and kings like marble statues, stern, wise, towering figures who shaped nations and commanded armies. But buried under polished legends, candlelit throne rooms, and grand portraits, something stranger lives. Because not every king was noble, and not every emperor was wise. And some men reached the height of authority, only to slide sideways into the most bizarre stories humanity ever recorded. Power does odd things to a mind left alone with itself, especially minds cushioned by silk, surrounded by servants who never say no, and protected from consequences like peasants are protected from gold. So tonight we'll be exploring the weirdest kings the world has ever seen. Think of it like a museum tour of monarchs who probably shouldn't have been left unsupervised. Caligula, Rome's unpredictable emperor. Caligula began his rule with celebration. Rome cheered for him like a returning war hero. Young, energetic, raised around legions, beloved by soldiers. The perfect emperor, everyone thought. For a brief moment, it worked. He granted freedoms, he held games, and he shared hope. Then, something inside him shifted. Maybe an illness cracked his mind. Maybe absolute power snapped a thread that had been stretched since childhood. Whatever the cause, Rome suddenly found itself ruled by a man who treated sanity like a festival mask, worn sometimes and tossed aside. He strolled through the palace talking to marble gods as though they whispered back. He built floating bridges just so he could ride across the sea on horseback like Poseidon with a flair for theatrics. He turned official meetings into dinner parties and dinner parties into state policy. And then came his most famous act, elevating his horse. Not just pampering the horse, not just loving the horse, but planning to make the horse a consul, one of the highest offices in Rome. The horse had a marble stable, ivory feed buckets, a necklace of jewels, and silk blankets. Some say it was fed oats mixed with wine, a beverage most soldiers couldn't even afford. Was Caligula insane, or was he simply telling the Senate, if a horse can do your job, maybe you should stop pretending you're special? Hard to say, history is undecided. Rome, however, was not amused. Eventually, a small group of senators and guards decided they'd had enough, and Caligula, once adored, became a lesson whispered through palace halls. Sometimes the greatest danger to an empire is when the crown believes the world is a stage and everyone else is props. Charles VI of France, the king made of glass. Charles VI began like many medieval kings, destined for solemn portraits and gilded manuscripts. Young, well-regarded, noble lineage, France expected stability. Instead, it received one of history's most fragile rulers, literally. One day, something in Charles broke. Not his body, his certainty. He awoke convinced he was made of glass bones, glass limbs, and a glass soul, perhaps. He ordered his clothes padded so he wouldn't shatter. He avoided movement. Servants approached him like they were carrying crystal dishes. Sitting too quickly, dangerous. Being touched, terrifying. Imagine a great medieval court, armored knights, iron gates, stone walls, and in the center, a king whispering, "Please be careful, I might break." It would be funny if it weren't so tragic, and yet it is funny. In that quiet way history sometimes is, when the absurd and the tragic hold hands for a moment. His episodes came like storms. Sometimes he screamed through corridors, convinced enemies hunted him. Sometimes he stared at his wife like she were a stranger. Sometimes he forgot he was a king at all, and other times he believed he was already dead. France looked to a throne that increasingly wasn't looking back. Another ruler might have led armies. Charles tried to not bump into furniture. And through it all, the kingdom moved on without him. Nobles scheming, armies marching, alliances shifting, while the king lived inside a world made of invisible glass. João V of Portugal. Some kings loved jewels, some kings loved hunting, and some kings loved feasts, music, and mistresses. João V loved mirrors, obsessively. A visitor to his palace might have wondered if they'd wandered into a carnival of reflections. hallways lined with polished glass. Chambers multiplied in glittering surfaces. Even doors and corners gleamed. He didn't do this because he thought he looked wonderful, though. To be fair, kings rarely suffered from low self-esteem. No, Joao feared threats. Spirits, poisoners, and assassins. Mirrors, he believed, could trick them, confuse them, and reflect them away. Imagine a king checking angles, peering sideways, and making sure his enemies were seeing the wrong Joao at the wrong time. Servants walked softly, because in a hall of mirrors footsteps never sounded alone. And late at night, when candles burned low and reflections multiplied in the dark, one couldn't help but wonder, who truly ruled that place? Joao, or all the Joaos staring back at him? Power isolates, and mirrors only make it literal. Paul I of Russia, the ice ritual emperor. Paul I never trusted the world. Not courtiers, not relatives, and not the shadows in his own palace halls. So he shaped his life around ritual. Every dawn, while ordinary kings dreamed beneath silk sheets, Paul marched into icy water, freezing baths. Teeth were clenching, steam rising from the skin like a winter battlefield. He believed purity lived in cold, that discipline froze danger out of the soul, that perhaps a king who could shock his body awake could shock his fears into silence. Spoiler, fear is stubborn. He recognized uniforms, rewrote etiquettes, checked doors for enemies, and rechecked them again. Then he checked again, because no one could ever be too sure when one believes danger breathes through palace walls. In another time, he might have been a strict gym coach, or an inventor of cold plunges for wellness influencers. Instead, he was the Emperor of Russia, and paranoia is more concerning in a palace than in a spa. Eventually, noble patience thawed before Paul did, and his rule ended not by illness, but by conspiracy in the night. Cold water protects against many things, but political ambition is not one of them. The king who swallowed a stone. History loses names sometimes. Time erodes reputation before it erodes marble. But stories? They cling. One Mesopotamian king, ancient, older than most nations' memories, believed a stone held divine power. Not symbolically, not spiritually, he believed it physically carried a god within. So he did the only thing that seemed logical to him in that moment. He swallowed it. That's one way to keep faith close to your heart. Afterward, he claimed a divine voice lived inside him, guiding him. Some believed him. Others nodded very slowly and backed away. Was he touched by the heavens, or touched by something else entirely? History doesn't say, but somewhere in ancient clay tablets or forgotten sands the story lives. A king who took divine power so literally he tried to absorb it more directly than anyone ever recommended. Pharaoh of Egypt, collector of chaos. Some kings build monuments, some draft reforms. Pharaoh collected everything. He ruled Egypt in the 20th century, a modern age, radios buzzing, cars in the streets, yet his habits felt like a prince lost in a treasure-filled attic. He hoarded coins, rare stamps, clocks, walking sticks, odd antiques, matchbooks, ivory miniatures, jeweled trinkets, medals, and keys. Keys to things that no longer existed. Vault keys, prison keys, ceremonial keys, keys with no locks, and locks with no keys. Thousands of them. If there was a flea market for royalty, Farouk would have lived there. He raided restaurants at night to inspect kitchens and steal food. He broke into shops and took pocket watches like a raccoon in royal silk. He once demanded his courtiers find him the largest diamonds in the world, because it suddenly seemed like a good idea that afternoon. Some kings feared enemies. Farouk feared losing a good bargain. He ate enormously, extravagant meals at midnight, courses stretching until sunrise. While Egypt stirred under the rising pressures of poverty and political unrest, its kings sat in golden chambers, polishing clocks and dreaming of sweets. Power doesn't always corrupt, sometimes it just gets distracted. When revolution came, Farouk fled, but not alone. He took everything he could pack. A kingdom lost, a suitcase full. History judged him kindly enough, not cruel, not mad, just a man who loved the world like a child loves a toy chest, and tried to rule it the same way. Zhu Huzhao became emperor of China as a teenager, which sounds dreamy until you realize teenagers barely trust themselves with car keys, let alone emperorship of one of the world's most powerful nations. He loved animals, games, costumes, and adventure. not court meetings, governance, or responsibility. So he invented his own world. He built a play fortress, filled it with entertainers, exotic pets, and a private army of boyhood imagination. He called it the Leopard Quarter, and it was less a palace section and more a royal amusement park. He staged mock battles. He dressed as generals and led pretend invasions. He raided local taverns in disguise just to feel alive. Once he patrolled the city pretending to be a constable, and then arrested his own officials for fun. China's vast empire waited for decisions, laws, diplomacy, food systems. But he was far too busy playing adventurer to worry about governing. Imagine a billionaire who builds himself a fake Wild West town and lives in it instead of going to board meetings. That was the emperor. Not evil, maybe foolish, and simply a boy who never learned to be anything else. Christian VII of Denmark was born in silk and ceremony, but his mind wandered through places no court tutor could reach. He spoke to himself, fought phantom enemies, collapsed suddenly in empty rooms as if someone just told him a joke only he could hear. At night he wandered the palace halls whispering to drapery and doorknobs as if furniture might answer. The royal physicians gave him advice. The nobles exchanged glances. Their servants moved quietly because in a palace ruled by unpredictability, silence becomes self-defense. Christian disliked being touched, avoided responsibility, forgot conversations moments after they happened. He flinched at sudden sounds and sometimes forgot which century he was living in. It would be cruel to laugh, and yet history smiles gently here, because Christian's odd life did not come with malice or tyranny, just confusion. So advisors ruled in his name, and Denmark continued on. Christian drifted like a curtain in a draft, present and absent, all at once. A king not feared, not hated, just lost inside himself. A reminder that not every strange monarch was dangerous, some simply carried burdens the world didn't know how to treat. Ludwig II conquered imagination. He adored legends, music, and dreams more than politics. He saw the world not as it was, but as it could be, lit by starlight, echoed by orchestras, crowned with spires rising from the mountains. Where other kings planned roads and trade, Ludwig planned castles. Neuschwanstein, a place of white stone and turrets like swan feathers against sky. Linderhof, gold like sunrise trapped in architecture. Here in Chiemsee, a mirrored echo of Versailles, built by a man chasing a different century entirely. He dined at odd hours, held conversations with imagined knights and forgotten heroes, and rode alone through forests at night wrapped in royal cloaks, conversing with stars. His ministers called him mad, and they removed him from power. Days later, he was found dead in a shallow lake water, a mystery as quiet as his dreams. Today, millions visit his castles. Germany sells postcards with his vision. Disney built its fantasy around his imagination. The Mad King created the dream world the rest of us now admire. Sometimes strange minds do not fall from greatness, they build it. Norton I, San Francisco, 1859. A man named Joshua Norton, once wealthy, lost his fortune in a bad rice investment, the kind of sentence that sounds made up but isn't. Instead of fading into obscurity, Norton decided failure was overrated and proclaimed himself Emperor of the United States. He printed his own decrees, he issued royal proclamations, he commanded armies that didn't exist. He demanded Congress be dissolved multiple times, and frankly, some modern viewers might hear that and think, well, he had his ideas. He dressed in military coats adorned with second-hand medals. He walked city streets as if parades followed him. He ate in a fine restaurant and paid with royal dignity and a smile. And San Francisco, charmed by his harmless grandeur, accepted it. Police once arrested him for vagrancy. The public exploded. How dare you arrest the emperor? The police apologized, and Norton received a guard of honor afterward. He was poor, yet he ruled the hearts. He had no power, yet he had loyalty. When he died, thousands attended his funeral. Newspapers mourned him as if he were a real emperor that had fallen. In a world that chases crowns, Norton simply declared one, and somehow, through kindness and confidence, he wore it better than many armies behind them. Some rulers lose power and accept fate. Justinian II was not one of those rulers. He ruled the Byzantine Empire with iron certainty and a confidence so strong it bordered on theatrical. Taxes tightened, punishments darkened, and whispers spread that the emperor's temper ran hotter than the palace braziers. Eventually, his enemies overthrew him. Not satisfied with exile, they slit his nose, a brutal way of saying, "You are not fit to rule anymore." Most men would have fled, retired quietly, or taken up gardening. Not Justinian. He escaped exile, gathered allies, and returned to claim his throne. His face now marked forever, his nose replaced with a golden prosthetic that gleamed in torchlight. A king without a nose, yet wearing one that shines bright like a battle medal. Imagine the shock of the aristocrats when the man they disfigured marched back into the capital with a glittering nose and an attitude like, "Miss me?" He reclaimed power and punished the enemies. He ruled again, scarred but unbroken. History rarely sees second acts like this one, and never again saw a king so literally gold-nosed and unbothered. Eric XIV believed danger lurked in goblets, food trays, and friendly greetings. Not in a paranoid, whispering way, in a let's fight poison with science kind of way. So he hired food tasters? No. He hired a court alchemist and began experimenting poison as a hobby. He studied toxins like modern YouTube chefs study seasoning, and anyone who upset him could find themselves becoming part of an impromptu science demonstration, not the kind with volcanoes and baking soda. His paranoia simmered into violence. He accused nobles of treason. He executed trusted advisors. Once, in a fit of rage, he personally killed members of the wealthy Stir family, including one man who was unarmed and kneeling. Paranoia and power are a dangerous chemistry set. Eventually, his own nobles decided they preferred a king who didn't carry poison vials like pocket mints. They imprisoned him, and he reportedly died by poison. There is irony, and then there is fitting. Eric wanted to master poison, and in the end, poison mastered him. Ibrahim grew up in the first confinement, isolated, watched, waiting for the throne he never expected to receive. When power finally landed in his lap, it was like handing a firework box to a man who'd only ever heard of rumors about sparks. He adored silk, but not as clothing, instead, as fascination. Silk cushions, silk robes, silk drapes, silk everywhere. He ordered the palace pools filled with flowers like bathing in perfume. He had fish fed only of choice grains, because if kings eat well, so should the fish. But his impulses ran deeper and stranger. He once had every cat in the palace inspected because he believed one possessed supernatural allure. And then there was the infamous harem decree, increasing the number of concubines in dramatic fashion, not out of romance but panic that heirs must multiply quickly. He ruled not with vision or strategy, but with sudden whims, like a startled child making decisions on instinct. Eventually, his own court removed him, exhausted by unpredictability, wrapped in silk. Charles II of Spain was born into a dynasty tangled by generations of inbreeding, a bloodline so close it left history wincing. He struggled to eat properly. His jaw was misaligned. He had difficulty speaking clearly. His body weakened early, and yet he wore a crown larger than life. People whispered he was bewitched. They blamed curses, spells, and anything supernatural, because a king so frail, so often ill, seemed like a riddle from fate itself. Servants claimed he believed enemies cursed his food. Priests performed exorcisms in palace corridors. Doctors debated what afflicted him, long before genetics explained what bloodlines had done. He was gentle, by most accounts, tragic, not comedic. But royal power does not pause for pity. Spain crumbled around him. Succession crisis brewed. The empire's strength withered like its king's health. Charles II stands not as a joke of history, but as a solemn reminder. When a crown is passed like an heirloom, sometimes fate breaks before the ruler does. A strange king not by choice, but by inheritance. His life is a quiet shadow side of monarchy, where power cannot save a person from nature's cost. Frederick William I of Prussia. He adored one thing more than anything else, and that was tall men. He created an elite regiment of unusually tall soldiers, called the Potsdam Giants. They were not simple soldiers. They were prized like rare exotic birds. He paid enormous sums to recruit them. He sent agents across Europe to find tall men. He reportedly kidnapped tall men when money wasn't persuasive enough. Visitors described his obsession as a half military vision, half, well, something else. He marched them, drilled them, dressed them in splendid uniforms, and sometimes just stared at them for pleasure. Imagine dedicating state funds to build the world's tallest, most fabulous marching squad. Meanwhile, he ruled with iron discipline, whipped soldiers for laziness, beat his son, future Frederick the Great, for liking art instead of muskets. He wasn't whimsical, he wasn't delusional, he was intense. A king who tried to build a nation like an infantry boot camp, and ended up remembered as a monarch who believed height was a military strategy. Peter III of Russia, the king who worshipped his enemy. Peter III had a problem most kings don't. He idolized the wrong army. Russia and Prussia were bitter rivals, locked in war, spilling blood, fighting for power in Europe. And Peter? He adored the Prussian king, admired the Prussian army, dressed his soldiers like Prussians, drilled them in Prussian style, saluted portraits of Prussian monarchs like a devoted fanboy. Imagine being crowned leader of a nation and immediately cosplaying as this enemy. It didn't sit well. Russian nobles stared, baffled. Generals clenched their jaws. Soldiers wondered if they were serving a king or a Prussian recruitment officer. What was his greatest strategic decision? He pulled Russia out of the war and then allied with Prussia. That's not diplomacy, that's historical plot twist comedy. His wife Catherine eventually decided Russia didn't deserve a ruler who didn't treat national loyalty like a costume accessory. Peter III didn't last. Kings fall for many reasons: ambition, rebellion, fate. He fell because he loved the wrong uniform. History is cruel, but also occasionally hilarious. Louis XIV of France. Louis, the Sun King, the man who thought he was France. Power made him elegant, grand, majestic, and weirdly comfortable doing personal things in public. He believed royalty should never be alone, not even during the most biological of moments. Courtiers attended his waking, his meals, his prayers, his wardrobe changes, and yes, even his bathroom routine. Nobility considered it an honor to watch the king relieve himself. Some held towels, some simply stood there hoping to be seen as loyal, useful, and visible. If that sounds bizarre, remember, absolute power creates strange etiquette. We laugh now, privately thankful our bosses don't require such devotion, but this once was royally normal. So here we stand at the end of a long marble corridor in a palace made of stories. Behind us, the doors led to rooms filled with paranoia, mirrors, castles, clocks, silk cushions, golden noses, imaginary armies, midnight feasts, poison studies, stolen pocket watches, and national armies built around height requirements. These kings were not evil legends or noble statues. They were human, wildly, beautifully, confusingly human. Power didn't make them strange. Power revealed their strangeness, amplified it, gave it servants, banners, palace wings, and entire economies to play with. Some were tragic, some were funny, some were both, because life rarely sticks to one tone. But beneath every crown, no matter how bizarre the behavior, there beat a heart vulnerable to fear, loneliness, dreams, delusions, imagination, ego, pain, hope, and the fragile, unpredictable currents of the mind. Kings were not gods. They were people who sometimes got the castle before they got the character. And history, with a straight face and quiet grin, remembers them all. This has been Sleeping with History, where the past truly never rests, and neither do we.